My name is Margaret Sloan. I'm a retired federal court interpreter. And tonight, my son brought his fiancée to my table for the first time. Julian looked proud, the way sons do when they believe they've chosen well. I didn't say much, just kept the rice warm and the tea steady, watching how she filled the room before she even sat down. Her name was Iris Lynn. She was young, elegant, the kind of woman who knew exactly how to smile for approval. The moment she walked through my door, she said, "Oh wow, it smells so authentic in here." Her voice was sweet, maybe too sweet, like something rehearsed. She clung to Julian's arm with both hands, her laughter soft and well-timed, and I could almost hear the rhythm of performance in it. Dinner moved easily at first. I served jasmine rice and stir-fried vegetables, and dishes I'd cooked for Julian since he was a boy. Iris complimented every bite, saying it was so light, not greasy like she expected. Her tone was polite, almost careful. Her parents, an overly polished couple who claimed to have just arrived from Taipei, nodded in unison, laughing at everything as if laughter were part of the meal. Then, Iris leaned toward them and switched to Mandarin. She thought I wouldn't understand. "She has no clue," she said, glancing at me. "I'll marry the son, get the visa, and move on." That was her mistake. Julian came by the next evening. Just him this time. He carried a paper bag of pastries from a cafe downtown, the same place he's taken me every Mother's Day since his father passed. He sat at the table where Iris had insulted me, loosening his tie and avoiding my eyes. The smell of burnt sugar hung in the air, too sweet to hide what was coming. He began carefully, the way people do when they're about to ask you not to ruin something for them. He said dinner had been awkward but insisted I'd misunderstood. "Maybe," he suggested, I'd misheard Iris's tone or taken her words out of context. He spoke like a man patching cracks in a wall that was already crumbling. I let him finish without interrupting. Then I told him what I'd heard. Every word, in perfect Mandarin, exactly as she said it. Julian laughed, quiet but nervous, the sound of disbelief dressed as comfort. "Mom," he said, "you're tired. She's under pressure. A new country, a new language, a new family. Maybe you heard it wrong." I didn't argue. I simply folded my hands and looked at him the way I used to look at students who refused to check their work. There was no anger, just distance, a thin curtain dropping between us. I realized he wasn't protecting her. He was protecting the version of love he wanted to believe in. When he left, the kitchen felt heavier than before. The teapot was still warm, but the silence around it had cooled. Some lessons, I thought, can't be taught with words. The next morning, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Ava Brooks had once been a student in my advanced translation seminar. Quiet, but razor sharp. Now, she worked as an investigative journalist for a digital paper in San Francisco. She answered before the second ring, her voice brisk, curious, unburdened by nostalgia. We met at a small cafe off the park, a place where the coffee was strong and no one cared to listen. I brought a photo from the engagement announcement Julian had emailed me. Ava studied it the way a surgeon studies an X-ray, slow, exact, without commentary. Then she asked for a copy and said she'd pull some threads. I didn't need sympathy. I needed facts. 2 days later, she sent me a message. Those parents aren't real. Beneath her note was a link to an event actor agency. I opened it and saw their faces under a package listing called Cultural Family Experience, ideal for immigration photos and ceremonies. The same couple who had smiled at my table were posing beside 4 different daughters. each in a different dress. My hands stayed steady as I scrolled. Ava duk deepa. Tracing the photographer's watermark from Julian's engagement photos. It matched a rental studio in San Francisco. Identical floral arches and backdrops recycled in dozens of sample albums. Every image felt like a shadow of something real, perfectly arranged to deceive. When she called again, her tone had changed. "I'll find her real records," she said. "Give me 48 hours. I thanked her and hung up. That night, I sat at my desk and opened a fresh notebook. For the first time since Iris entered my home, I stopped feeling angry. I started feeling ready. Ava called me 2 days later, just after dawn. Her voice was calm, but the words carried weight. "Her name isn't Iris Lin," she said. "It's Lin Shumin. She's still legally married. Husband in Guangzhou. No divorce record anywhere." I wrote it down slowly, each word deliberate, like evidence in court. I sat very still for a long moment, the phone resting on the table beside my untouched tea. The silence in my house felt different now, less lonely, more alert. I printed every file Ava sent her alias. The rental studio receipt, the casting invoice for the fake parents, and a copy of the Chinese marriage certificate. I placed each page into a folder, aligning the corners perfectly. When I finished, I opened the drawer where I kept my late husband's watch. The glass face was cracked, but it still ticked faintly, marking time like a reminder that patience always wins. I slid the folder beneath it, a quiet promise that this story would end in order, not chaos. The truth didn't need rage. It needed structure. That evening, Julian called. His voice sounded lighter, unaware of the storm forming around him. He said Iris wanted to invite me to dinner again, a second chance. He called it. As if kindness could erase deceit, I told him I'd host this time. The same meal, the same table. He sounded relieved, grateful even, mistaking agreement for forgiveness. After we hung up, I looked at the clock again. The second hand moved steady and sure. I had all the pieces now. All I needed was timing. Revenge wasn't about anger, it was about precision. And I'd spent a lifetime learning both. Friday evening came quiet and cool, the kind of weather that settles nerves. I set the table exactly as before, down to the folded lotus napkins and the porcelain bowls. The jasmine rice steamed gently, and the same teapot waited, polished and warm. There was comfort in repetition. It would make the contrast sharper when the truth arrived. Iris came dressed in pale blue silk, a color that begged to be trusted. She carried orchids this time, their roots still wet, and handed them to me with both hands. Her smile was gracious, practiced, the kind that holds no weight behind it. Behind her were the Vegas, her rented parents, still perfectly poised, still hollow. Julian looked relieved to see everyone getting along. He kept glancing between me and Iris as if this meal might erase every awkward word from the last one. I asked gentle questions, simple ones about her family and her work, and she answered smoothly. The story rehearsed to the comma, every detail she gave, I already had documented in black and white. The performance was flawless, and it was almost beautiful to watch her fall into it. Halfway through dessert, I excused myself. I walked to the front door just as headlights touched the driveway. Agent Caleb Morton stepped out of an unmarked car, his coat buttoned, his face unreadable. We had spoken 2 nights before. He understood everything. I opened the door before he could knock. When I returned to the dining room, I placed my napkin neatly beside my plate. Would our guests like to stay a little longer? I asked. Calm and deliberate. The Vegas froze mid-smile. Iris blinked. Unsure. Then Caleb stepped forward, his badge gleaming under the kitchen light. I watched her throat tighten as he spoke her real name. Timing, after all, is everything. Agent Caleb Morton stood at the head of the table, his tone steady and professional. He addressed her by her real name, Lin Shumin, explaining that she was under investigation for immigration fraud and misrepresentation of marital status. His voice carried no accusation, only fact, the kind that cannot be argued. The room went still, every sound swallowed by disbelief. Iris's breath caught, her eyes darting between him, Julian, and me. She rose from her chair so fast it scraped the floor. I don't know what this is, she stammered, but her pulse betrayed her. Visible beneath the thin skin of her neck, Caleb didn't raise his voice. He simply said she should sit down, that cooperation would make things easier. Mr. Vega began fidgeting with his jacket, the act of a man losing his script. Mrs. Vega stayed seated, staring into her teacup like it held absolution. Then, with a small, defeated breath, she looked at Caleb and said she would cooperate. The illusion dissolved in an instant. Every polite smile, every careful word gone. Julian hadn't moved. He looked at me as though I'd just turned the world inside out. I could see the question forming in his eyes, the one he couldn't bring himself to say. I met his stare and spoke quietly. Only once. You set yourself up, I told Iris. I just turned on the light. That was when she bolted. She shoved past Julian, nearly knocking over the chair, and ran for the door. Caleb didn't chase her immediately. He didn't need to. He already had enough. The sound of the door slamming echoed through the house, followed by silence, so heavy it felt alive. Julian sat down again, slowly, in the seat she'd abandoned. For the first time in years, my son said nothing. 2 days passed before Julian called again. The silence between us had weight, like a curtain no one wanted to draw back. When the phone finally rang, it was close to midnight. His voice was unsteady, small, in a way I hadn't heard since he was a boy. He said he'd spoken with Agent Morton earlier that day. Iris had admitted everything: her false identity, her fake parents, her marriage back in China. Julian's words came out fractured, like a confession he didn't know how to make. I thought you were trying to ruin what I had, he said quietly. I didn't realize you were saving me. I told him the truth didn't always arrive in the form we want. Sometimes it wears a mother's patience. When we hung up, I sat for a while before noticing an envelope tucked beneath my door. It carried the seal of Homeland Security. I made tea first, the way I always did when something important waited to be opened. The letter was brief, the petition denied, the visa revoked, the case under federal review. Julian had withdrawn his affidavit of support voluntarily. The system had done the rest. I folded the letter neatly and placed it beside my husband's watch. Outside, the street was still, the world moving on without ceremony. Justice rarely makes noise, it just resets the balance quietly. The teapot clicked as it cooled, and I realized I no longer felt anger, only closure. Some storms don't need thunder to end. A week later, Ava stopped by unannounced. She carried a thin envelope and 2 cups of coffee. Her expression caught somewhere between triumph and regret. Inside the envelope were photographs, proof that Iris had been seeing a wealthy investor months before she met Julian. The pictures were sharp, professional, impossible to misread. Ava said quietly that the evidence would help close the case for good. Julian came over that evening, his shoulders squared, but his eyes tired. He apologized more than once, each time softer than the last. I didn't absolve him completely. Forgiveness isn't something you hand out like sugar. I told him that trust doesn't disappear in a day it bends. And if you want it straight again, you work for it. He nodded and asked what would happen to Iris now. I told him she would face the consequences. Her own choices had earned fraud charges, deportation, and a trail of paper she could never erase. The Vegas were also under review for providing false documentation, and Ava's report would see daylight by the end of the month. Justice, I said, moves quietly but thoroughly. When Julian left, he placed a note beside his empty cup. It said, "Thank you for not giving up on me." I kept it folded inside the same drawer as my husband's watch and the case files, all reminders of what patience can build and what blindness can destroy. That night, as I poured the last of the tea, the house finally felt still again. Revenge, I realized, had never been my goal. Truth was, and truth, when handled carefully, restores more than it ruins. The house feels different now, lighter somehow, as if it had been holding its breath all this time. I spend my mornings at the library again, sorting returns, listening to the quiet rhythm of other people's lives. Words and silence have always been my language. Both tell stories if you know how to listen. Some days, Julian stops by with coffee and a softness I don't remember seeing in him before. The case against Iris moved forward quickly. Her visa was revoked, her marriage fraud confirmed, her departure scheduled without appeal. The Vegas accepted a reduced charge in exchange for testimony, and Ava's article ran on a Sunday morning. Concise and merciless. Justice didn't roar, it whispered. Precise and final. One evening, I found myself sitting by the kitchen table again. The same table where everything began. The rice bowl was still there, unchipped, its porcelain smooth beneath my fingers. I lit the small lamp beside it, not for warmth, but for clarity. In its glow, I could see every piece of this story fitting back into place. Each lie neutralized by fact. Fluency, I thought, was never about grammar. It was about truth, the kind that doesn't need to shout to be heard. I poured a final cup of tea, watching the steam rise and fade. The world outside was calm, and for the first time in a long while, I felt no need to listen for danger. The light was on. That was enough. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it struck a chord or reminded you of your own battles, share your thoughts below. Your voice matters here. Don't forget to subscribe for more true-to-life stories of justice, strength, and redemption. Until next time, take care of your peace.